Hey friends, it's the Dragon LML, and I'm back with a little more on the new House of the Dragon trailer that's got everyone burning with desire, deep in their draconic hearts. Or loins, whichever it may be. Anyway, I did a live stream a couple of days ago with my full analysis on each scene, so check out the House of the Dragon playlist for that and a bunch of other House of the Dragon videos. But today, I want to give you 5 things that I loved about the House of the Dragon trailer with a specific cultural bent. And some of these may be things that you may have missed, including Byzantine Targaryens and a theory that we have already seen mushroom in the trailer. In a manner of speaking, anyway. So click that like button and subscribe bell for me, and stay tuned for that theory at the end of the video. So first off, Rhaenyra's attire in this scene is a real showstopper, just in general, but there's a lot of fine detail here to take notice of. So have a look at her very fancy hat, in particular this band of dark square-cut jewels across the brow. They look like black amethyst or something like that to me, and they definitely seem meant to recall the design of the crown of Aegon the Conqueror, which was famously wrought of Valyrian steel and square-cut rubies, and which has been depicted in fan art pretty consistently, as you can see here. This hat, in other words, sends a clear message that Rhaenyra is the heir to the Conqueror's throne. Which, by the way, does look a little closer to book canon Iron Throne now, being a proper tangled mess of swords, although it's still a little bit short. But anyway, yes, her hat evokes Aegon's crown, and that's no coincidence. You'll notice that King Viserys himself has eschewed the more austere crown of Aegon in favor of a more ornate golden one. That's something that some Targaryen kings do, and it's usually an indication that this isn't a warrior king, not a true wild dragon, you might even say. Daemon Targaryen, for example, would surely wear Aegon's crown if he were ever to sit the Iron Throne. The second thing to discuss is the ornamented goldwork neckpiece that she's wearing. I'm not sure quite what to call it. It's obviously more than a necklace. But in any case, eagle-eyed myth head Aidan Buford spotted the Sun and Spear sigil of House Martell, ruling House of Dorne, on the back panel here, as you can clearly see. Once he pointed that out, I found the Tully sigil on the front, just to the left of the Targaryen dragon, and to the right we apparently have the rearing lion of Lannister. It's hard to make out at first until you compare it directly to the sigil. Above the lion is the moon and falcon of House Arryn, which is actually easier to make out in this other shot here. This looks like the Stark sigil on the back here, to the left of the Martell Sun and Spear. It looks like it's the previous HBO Stark sigil with just the direwolf head, the one that looks like it has armor on it. That leaves 2 that we can't see, and presumably we'll find the Greyjoy Kraken and Tyrell Rose on those. In any case, you can see that together with the headgear meant to evoke Aegon's crown, the message of Rhaenyra's accoutrement is clear. Rhaenyra Targaryen is the heir to the 7 kingdoms. And indeed, this is the scene where the Lords of Westeros are swearing to totally abide by Viserys' wishes, no matter what happens. Pinky swear, you guys.
I, Ormond Baratheon,
do hereby solemnly swear an oath that my treacherous, good-for-nothing son will throw out the window when it suits him 15 years later. Next, we have Byzantine Targaryens. Big hat tip here. Several myth heads were on this in the chat. Curro Rodrigo Garcia, Brona MacArthur, Stephen Miles Cook, Edgar Alice, and of course, A-News travel blog, #1 source for history. Okay, so it seems that Rhaenyra's fab attire didn't just drop out of the sky, but rather was inspired by some very famous queens of the Byzantine Empire, which is of course the eastern half of the Roman Empire, and at a certain point after the fall of Rome, the continuation of the Roman Empire in the east. This right here is Byzantine Empress Theodora, wife of Emperor Justinian, and this is a very well-known mosaic of her likeness. What's really cool is that it's likely that they drew on this image for inspiration because Empress Theodora's story seems to be one that George might have drawn on when writing Fire and Blood. So check this out. During Justinian and Theodora's reign, there was something called the Nika riots, and during these riots, 2 rival factions called the Blues and the Greens were essentially tearing the city apart. Justinian, being a bit cowardly, wanted to flee the city, but Theodora challenged Justinian to stay and fight, very famously saying, "For one who has reigned, it is intolerable to be a fugitive. May I never be deprived of this purple robe, and may I never see the day when those who meet me do not call me Empress. If you wish to save yourself, my lord, there is no difficulty. We are rich, over there is the sea, and yonder are the ships. Yet reflect for a moment whether, when you have once escaped to a place of security, you would not gladly exchange such safety for death. As for me, I agree with the adage that the royal purple is the noblest shroud. Now, the wanderings of King Viserys, Dany's brother, shows just how true this is. He fled his kingdom, and he was called the Beggar King, and treated more like a beggar than a king. There are a couple of moments in the Dance of the Dragons that will definitely remind us of this famous moment with Theodora and Justinian. And there's definitely a bit of Theodora in Rhaenyra, and more than a bit in Rhaenys, the Queen Who Never Was. These other two lovely and regal Byzantine empresses are Saint, I believe it's Irene. It looks like Irene, but it's said Irene. In any case, she's from Hungary. And on the right here is Empress Zoe Porphyrogenita? I've spelled it on the screen. In any case, just to give you more of an idea what Byzantine dress looks like. And here you can see some modern reconstructions based on recovered artifacts, these mosaics that I've just shown you, as well as books and poems written by the empresses which described their daily life. Overall, this seems like a great choice for the attire of the Targaryens. And in case anyone thought this also looks kind of Russian, yes, the Byzantine Empire definitely exerted a strong influence on Russian culture when Byzantine missionaries converted the royalty of the Kievan Rus to Orthodox Christianity, even before Russia existed as a state. And by the way, check out Jackson Crawford's video on the Kievan Rus and the formation of Russia for more on that, linked below in the description. And there's actually more. Check out the back of Rhaenyra's dress, which features some sort of two-headed dragon with a crown in between the two heads. A two-headed dragon, what's up with that? We're supposed to have three heads, right? Well, this is a very clear adaptation of a well-known symbol of the Byzantine Empire, the double-headed eagle, which looks like this. It also has a crown in between the two heads, so it's definitely a dead ringer for inspiration. Now, the idea behind the two eagle heads is that they represent the political authority and the divine authority of the king, as well as the eastern and western halves of the empire during certain periods. So in the context of House of the Dragon, the two-headed dragon probably carries the first meaning, since all kings of Westeros must be crowned and anointed by the faith. In fact, if we go back to the front of the golden neck ornament, you'll notice the seven-pointed star of the Faith of the Seven right below the central dragon, which similarly implies the divine right to rule. As to the connotation of a divided realm, well, obviously this is a story about a civil war, so that's relevant. But at this point in the story, this is before the division of black and green factions at court. But it's likely that the costume designers felt this would be an apt foreshadowing of the division to come. To anyone who recognized the call out to the Byzantine symbolism, that's certainly the poetic sense of doom that would be conveyed by this two-headed dragon. So just for kicks, here's a much more ancient two-headed eagle man from a Central Asian Bronze Age civilization called the Oxus civilization, also known to scholars as the Bactria Margiana Archaeological Complex, or BMAC. This is a metal axe head from about 2000 BCE, depicting the two-headed eagle hero of the BMAC in combat against a boar on the right, and on the left, what scholars call a dragon or a griffin, essentially some kind of clawed, winged monster that looks a bit like a lion and a bit like a dragon. If you'd like to learn more about the BMAC and about the origins of India, actually, then check out my other YouTube channel that I've recently started called Mythic Concepts. I have a video there called Indian Origins that I just put up with a full breakdown on the BMAC, as well as the potential origins of the ice dragon. That's right, the first ice dragon mythology. And speaking of India, the name Rhaenyra is Indian in origin, though it's usually spelled Renira. I'm not sure if that's where George derived the name, but it may well be, because George seems to have borrowed a ton of Indian and Iranian/Zoroastrian mythology to fashion most of his dragon lore for Ice and Fire, as well as Valorism. I actually did a hour-and-a-half documentary video called The Vedic Hindu Origins of Dany and Drogon that you can find in the Daenerys Targaryen playlist to document all of that. And it's perhaps my finest, or at least my most scholarly, A Song of Ice and Fire work. So check that out if you want to know where George got names like Dany, Khaleesi, Azor Ahai, the idea of three-headed dragons, and much more. All right, so moving on to some slightly simpler stuff, but staying cultural. I loved the Velaryon funeral customs. The Targaryens, of course, cremate their dead, sometimes in dragonfire if you're a dead king or queen, and that's likely a custom that dates back to Valyria, you'd have to think. So it's pretty interesting and remarkable that the Velaryons have developed their own funerary practice, one based on the sea and one that actually reminds us of other ocean-centric Westerosi cultures. The Ironborn of the Iron Islands and the Tullys of Riverrun actually both send their dead down to watery halls, which they believe wait below the surface to greet them. Neither Tullys nor Ironborn use a stone sarcophagus though, so that part appears to be a unique Velaryon custom. I loved that because it means that the Velaryons have had time to develop their own unique culture on Driftmark, separate and apart from Valyria, the Targaryens, or Westeros. And that just makes them more interesting. We do, of course, hear of a legend of the founding of House Velaryon, which sounds a bit fishy, which was that the famous driftwood throne of House Velaryon was given to them by the Merling King to conclude a pact. I don't know who the Merling King is, but it sounds like a damn squisher. So, it could be that the Velaryons have unholy spells gifted to them by the Deep Ones themselves, for which they trade the bodies of their dead. Or perhaps the first Velaryons draped themselves in local folklore as a way of claiming authority. It's hard to say. The Velaryons still have that throne, though. In book canon, Corlys Velaryon actually moved it from the old capital at Driftmark, which was a bit drafty, to the nice new one he built at high tide. So it must be important, at least as a symbol, if not as an abominable squisher talisman used to consecrate children to the Deep Ones. I kid, but the point is that whomever the first Velaryons were, they seem to have taken on or developed new cultural practices on Driftmark relating to the sea, and which were probably linked to whatever was going on Driftmark before they came. Not saying that had something to do with squishers, but, I also have to wonder about the possibility that the show version of House Velaryon has Summer Islander ancestry. I'll actually have a video out next week about how the choice to cast Black Velaryons can both work with the canon and be very interesting, where I'll speculate about the handful of logical options that the show can go with. So watch out for that. And one of the possibilities is that the Velaryons intermarried with people from the Summer Isles sometime back in their history, perhaps shortly after coming to Driftmark. If that's the case, then Summer Islander custom and culture would have influenced that of House Velaryon, and we might see the show depict something like that. Now, we don't know what the funerary practices of the Isles are, but perhaps it involves a stone sarcophagus. Also, take note that this is definitely Laena's funeral here. This stone sarcophagus has a definite woman's shape, as the live chat was quickly able to determine, with all maturity and good manners, as you'd expect. And absolutely no talk whatsoever about stone boobies. Alright, from Velaryon funeral customs to Valyrian wedding customs. These two shots of Daemon and Rhaenyra's secret Valyrian wedding definitely have everyone buzzing. That's a lot of blood there. Apparently, you've got to cut deep when mingling the golden blood of old Valyria. One even wonders if some amount of low-level sorcery might be going on here. I mean, all Valyrian magic is rooted in blood and fire, and if dragon lords can bond with their dragons in some sort of soft sense, is there perhaps a layer of magic to the Valyrian union of draconic wedlock? I'm just speculating, but even if not, it's definitely intense, barbaric, and carnal. And if normal Westerosi weddings end in a bedding, then what does a Valyrian wedding that starts out with deep flesh wounds use for a grand finale? There's only one answer.
Blood orgy! Yay! Blood orgy! Blood orgy! Yay!
On a more serious note, we also saw this very cool brazier, which seems like a dragon egg incubator, surely wrought of Valyrian steel. So, we should in general expect the level of Valyrian lore and sorcery to be markedly higher than what was on Game of Thrones. Daenerys, you have to realize, was kind of at a disadvantage, cut off from practically all of the arcane knowledge of old Valyria. But House of the Dragon is set back in the days when the Targaryens basically possessed all of whatever lore they brought with them from Valyria. Baelor the Befuddled hadn't burned any books yet, in other words, the good books in particular. So we're liable to find out any number of truths about Valyrian lore, such as, yes, Valyrian weddings involve blood magic, or, yeah, they used Valyrian steel incubators as part of the egg hatching process. So I'm definitely loving all of this. The fifth thing I loved about the House of the Dragon trailer is Daemon's personal gold cloak army. And don't worry, the mushroom theory is coming. That's a bonus. So as you know by now, Daemon essentially creates the gold cloaks. He's put in charge of the City Watch after Otto Hightower has maneuvered to oust him from more prestigious offices. But Daemon turns the tables by transforming the shabby City Watch into the more impressive and more intimidating and more violent Gold Cloaks, which we all know and love from Game of Thrones. As you can see from this scene, these are Daemon's men, absolutely, and that will come in handy throughout the course of the actual war. We see the Gold Cloaks shit-stomping around the city, kicking in some doors, cracking some skulls, and we should definitely picture Daemon right in the thick of things, administering cruel punishments without hesitation. Now, what jumped out to me on my, 19th watch of the trailer was that Daemon even has a bunch of Gold Cloaks with him on Dragonstone when he's trying to make off with the dragon's egg for his and Mysaria's baby. I mean, that's not King's Landing, so what the hell are Gold Cloaks doing on Dragonstone? This just shows you how much the Gold Cloaks really are Daemon's personal army more than they are anything else. Okay, so this mushroom theory comes from Austin Flowers, who's been a guest on the channel before. Check out the Is a Song of Ice and Fire nihilistic stream. Short answer, no. Spoiler alert. So anyway, Austin noticed that all of the court scenes are very suspiciously shot from a waist-high perspective, almost as if we were watching through the eyes of a dwarf. Is this mushroom cam? Is it possible? House of the Dragon uses some kind of meta-narrator to frame the jumps between time periods in the story? Is Mushroom going to be a weird version of Fred Savage's grandfather in the classic movie The Princess Bride? It seems a little crazy, and I'm not sure that this is a choice that I'd go with. But I mean, they are all shot from that waist-high point of view, so either that's just a stylistic choice they're making with the cinematography, or we're watching the court scenes through Mushroom Cam. Alright, thanks everyone, this has been a blast, and of course check out the House of the Dragon playlist for more House of the Dragon videos. Check out the link to our Patreon campaign in the description of the video below, and please make sure you're subscribed to the channel with the notification bell set to all so you never miss a video or a live stream. Cheers, and I'll see you next time.